He saw this interconnectivity and interdependence, and through this he saw the need for respect for all people and all things, and our responsibility to ensure the well-being of all and of nature. And in this, he saw the role of women as well. So, men and women as partners and as equals. So, this was very important to Gandhiji. I know that many people think that he was a chauvinist, but he wasn't, because he believed in equality and he promoted this equality. And if you look at some of the things that he wrote about Ba, Kasturba has been a neglected, feature in our writings. Very few people have written about her. But we saw a quotation when she was in South Africa in 1913. She said that I have nothing to think about. I am going to join the struggle. And we will find a way how to join the struggle. That is what she said. She joined the struggle and she went to prison in South Africa. And as you all know, she died in prison in India. And so, at a time when the status of women was so low that women didn't even have a vote in 1913. All over the world, women didn't have a vote. They were thought of as not being capable of casting a vote. And at that time, Kasturba was ready to participate in the struggle and to go to prison. And so, she was a woman in her own right. And she became that because she was also given encouragement by Gandhiji and supported by Gandhiji. So, but also Gandhiji derived a lot of, skills and strength from Kasturba herself. He talks about how courageous Kasturba was and how she had made him fearless and courageous. So these are important, aspects of his philosophy. With these ideas in mind, he built a utopia, which was not in the traditional sense a dream or an unachievable fantasy, but a very realistic utopia, which is described very well by Whitaker in his book. Thomas Whitaker has written this book called Gandhian Sarvodaya. And in that, he talks about utopia, Gandhian utopia. And he describes how realistic Gandhian utopia was. Because of time constraints, I can't go into all the details. But I believe that Gandhiji had a great deal of confidence in human beings. Basically, he believed in every person and he believed in the strength that every person had. He believed that given the right conditions, every person has the potential to be good and to be able to achieve according to his or her own talents and abilities. He believed that evil is only resorted to because of the conditions in which we live and our own distorted vision of our environment. Therefore, when we can change people's perceptions through love and caring, people change for the better. Love and caring are the key factors within which people change. It is this belief that underpins the Satyagraha movement. There is no hate for the for the opponent. There is no hate, and there is no adversity or violence in Satyagraha. It is based on love, and that love is extended even to the opponent, to the enemies. so called enemy. Gandhiji saw this in practice at the Narayan Hill monastery, and his later ashrams were based on these principles of love, equity, and service for all, to all. So finally, Gandhiji's ideas of economics were based on these principles, and he felt that if everyone was driven by these principles, then there would be no economic exploitation. There would be a cooperative spirit and everybody working together for the common good of all. There would be no need for expropriation or any forceful taxation, etc. But people will share and live in harmony and in fairness. Social justice was important, and he writes extensively on this in Hind Swaraj and the role of doctors, lawyers, and educationists towards promoting this goal. Today, we see, for instance, Pope Francis talks about the economy of solidarity. The economy of solidarity is very akin to the Gandhian concept of trusteeship, where people, if they have a lot, and if they care for other people, they would share what they have. And so, if we can build up that caring and love in every person, then the industrialist would produce for the people, will pay and look after the employees, and would spread the love, the message of love in the community. Instead of exploiting the community, exploiting the environment, and you know, engaging in illicit ways of making money. Because if you have these values, you won't do those kinds of things. And this is what Bapuji believed in, Gandhiji believed in. And that's his philosophy, the basis of his philosophy. So I believe that if we all strive for and live by these principles, which we can actually achieve the utopia that Gandhiji was talking about. And I think if we listen to Thunberg, Greta Thunberg, and others, we see that thread running through the youth today who are talking about this. They are saying that we have to change our world. We can't go on as, we have been, because we will kill the environment, we'll kill the world that way. And so this is very much Gandhian philosophy, and I hope that what I have said will help you. But I know that you have to do a lot more reading to really understand deeply all these concepts. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Ela ji, I also believe that Mahatma Gandhi ji's philosophies and values are suitable for actually all age groups. And the queries of the youngsters today would be primarily focused on how he's relevant for in today's times, because today's times are full of violence, full of dishonesty, full of corruption, full of all the maladies that are actually afflicting the society. But your enlightening talk, I'm sure, is like a guidance to the students, and I'm sure they are going to pick up the couple of books on how to understand Bapu and Mahatma Gandhi more in today's times. But there are a few questions that the students have. I would like to start with the first question by the student of Media Studies from our institute, Ria Saxena. I would request you to unmute yourself.
My question is like there are plenty of teachings one can inculcate from Gandhiji, such as being truthful and repenting of one's action. If we are to talk about the current scenario of society, where most people have become quite apathetic to plight of people and easily resort to lying for self goods, how can we practice Gandhiji's learning and teachings in contemporary times?
I think that, when we look at Gandhiji's philosophy, he believes that we can change people. So those people who are the cause of these, the plight of the people, the poverty that we see around us, we need to change that. And to change that, there are two things that we need to do. Number one is that we need to get the people who are exploiting others or who have a lot and can give to the poor, go to them and change their feelings, their views, and make them see what the poor are suffering and that they have a responsibility towards uplifting the poor. They will then assist the poor if we can convince them. And the second thing is to help the poor to understand that they can do something about their plight, that they are not helpless. They can help themselves. And we begin to teach them how to become self sufficient. So there is the one section that needs to work with the community and uplift the community, not just give them charity and then leave them, but educate them, help them, teach them to do things in order that they become self sufficient. But at the same time, lead them to support from those who have. So bring, a compact between the haves and the have not. How to access opportunities, the computer programs, you have contacts, you have all that knowledge. But if you are poor, you are left marginalized from all these, access to all these resources. So we are a bridge between the poor and the resources, and we help them to access the resources. So slowly, one by one, people are getting employment, getting opportunities, setting up their own businesses, doing all kinds of things. And that is what I think we need to do. There's no one fit for every situation, but you can go into a situation and begin to understand it and take on, even if it's just a small community. You're doing something there, you're doing environmental information, you are doing self sufficiency, you're giving them empowerment. All these things you are doing in a small community, and then other people will follow. And when we all grow, we can make it a big issue which will affect the entire globe.
I think Mahatma Gandhi's quote itself says this, that be the change you want to see around you. So I think at a grassroots level, if everybody works to bring some change around their small community, small area, and that is what probably can bring the change in the country and the world, I suppose so. That is what we understand from your answer, Ilaji. So now, second question, of course, pertains to Gandhiji's South Africa sojourn, the work that he did there. And I must say, Ilaji, that a lot of people, particularly youngsters, are very much unaware about the gargantuan work that Gandhiji had done in South Africa, because it's actually the germ of his social reforms and the work he did started from South Africa. Second question relates to that.
My question to you is that Gandhiji, when he first started his journey from South Africa as a barrister, he didn't have much knowledge on how to be a human being or person of society. Eventually, when he worked there and he met other people and had experiences, he was able to progress. And eventually, to his participation in the Indian freedom struggle. So my question is that in current times, the youth of our country, how can we gather values? How do we understand his proceedings as a person and also absorb it into ourselves to further develop ourselves just like Gandhiji had done to himself?
Okay, that's a very important question because it's about change. And Gandhiji showed through his life that people can change. And he changed. When he came to South Africa, he was, he was a chauvinist at that time. He felt that women are inferior to men, that they had to do certain jobs, and so on. He had the whole idea of, how one civilization meant that one has to be well dressed and live in a particular lifestyle and all those kinds of things. And therefore, when he came here, that is how he was. He dressed very well, immaculate dressing. He lived in a house that was beautiful, where all the lawyers lived. He lived in that area. And so those were the ideas that he came with. Over the 21 years, all that changed. So the first change happened at Pietermaritzburg station. As you know, he was thrown out. And he really suffered a very rude shock for the first time as a 24-year-old young man in South Africa, in a foreign country, all alone, and being so rudely treated. He came from a family where everybody respected them. He was never ill treated or spoken to badly, whether by his parents, his family, or anyone else. And to have this kind of treatment was like a real shock to him. And as he was sitting in that cold Pietermaritzburg station, waiting for the next train, he began to think, and the first thought was, shall I go back to India where I'm quite happy and live there? Why do I have to stay in this country where I'm treated like this? And then he thought, no, if I run away from here, it's a cowardly thing. And I'm not a coward, I have to be brave. The second thought that came to his mind then was that I should stay here and live as other people are living, other black people or Indian people are living here, and accept that this country is like this and we can't do anything about it. But he felt that any acceptance of this kind of situation is like condoning the situation. Therefore, his final idea was that I'll stay here and I will protest against this treatment of fellow black people. And so that is what led to his life in South Africa and the change in the first seed of change in his mind that I have to protest. Starting from that, he then began to look at other things. He read scriptures, he read, you know, um, philosophical writings by Ruskin and Tolstoy. Thoreau came later, but, in South Africa, he had read Tolstoy and Ruskin. And he began to think about changing his lifestyle. And therefore, I think it was just about 10 years later, he arrived in 1893. In 1904, he read this little book by Ruskin and immediately thought, I think there needs to be a change. I'm going to leave the city, go to the rural area, and work in that community. I'm going to throw away my lifestyle, this fancy lifestyle and lead a simple life. And those were the principles that he thought of and established the Phoenix settlement on those principles. And that happened in 1904 at Phoenix. So the thing is that if you read good books, and this is a very important aspect of Gandhiji's life as well. You know, there was a story which Mr. Bhattacharya has written about in his book, where Gandhiji was traveling on a ship, and on the ship there were a lot of young people, and they felt, you know, that they were quite bored on the ship, but they felt that maybe to liven up, they would write a little pamphlet, which they would then distribute and have some fun. So the pamphlet was meant to be light-hearted, but it also talked about all the scandals that were going on in the ship. So wrote about the different people and what they were doing on the ship and their life and all that sort of thing, making a mockery of the people and their lives. And then they gave Gandhiji this pamphlet to read. And it was a whole lot of pages clipped together with a clip. And Bapuji read through it, and then he took out the pen and he gave back the papers to the young people. And so the young people said, "So Bapuji, what do you think of our writing?" And Gandhiji said, "I took the most precious thing from this." The precious thing was the clip that he took. So if you see what he implied in that little story, which actually happened according to Bhattacharya, you will realize that Gandhiji's idea of media, of stories, of books, was that read something that is going to enhance your thinking, that is going to give you something, some education. Don't read rubbish, because by reading rubbish, you'll begin to think in those terms. Therefore, read good books and begin to think about things, and that is going to bring about a positive change in people's attitudes, lifestyles, everything. That is the change.
My question to you, during our country's freedom struggle, Gandhiji started Swadeshi movement so that we could be self-reliant. But in the current post-industrialization, where mass-produced goods are more in consumption, so how relevant is Swadeshi concept in modern time for country like India?
So I have two points to that. Number one is Gandhiji's Swadeshi movement was based on the concept of self-reliance, as you have put here. And self-reliance is important, but with self-reliance, you need to have also a market to be able to sell your goods. You can't just make goods, manufacture things, and not be able to sell them. So therefore, we have to have people who are prepared to pay maybe a little extra and to buy the goods rather than buy what we get from these mass produced by the person themselves. And if we pay importance to that and we give that kind of importance to these local industries, in that way we are supporting them, and we are sending a message to these big industrialists that we don't want you to continue to exploit people, exploit our environment, and exploit our resources. So that is the message: polluting the environment, exploiting the resources, and exploiting the community. We don't want that. We would rather have people producing their own things. It's a message that we have to give to the people, and it may be a sacrifice that we have to make in terms of how much we spend. If we go for the cheapest thing and want to buy the cheapest stuff, then we are not going to win the battle because we're going to encourage industries to continue producing.
My question to you is that Mahatma Gandhi was also a social reformer and worked throughout his life to uplift the poor and downtrodden, even in South Africa. So, as a member of parliament, how did you work towards the same, imbibing your grandfather?
So, our first task in Parliament, the first democratic parliament in which I was a member, was to look at all these legislation that discriminated against people on the basis of race, simply because you were a black person, you wouldn't be able to do certain things, you wouldn't be able to have access to certain benefits and things like that. And I think in that first year, we had, the most uh, legislation that any parliament has ever had. And so these legislation were all to counteract the, many years of apartheid system in South Africa. So we had to look through all this and change them. Some could be amended, but many of them we had to throw the entire old legislation and bring in new legislation. So that was about reform in a way where every individual, regardless of their color, regardless of class, caste, any other barriers, gender as well, we had to look at gender issues too, because gender was uppermost in we had a gender commission, a gender committee in Parliament, which looked at every legislation had to be, gender friendly, not affecting anybody else. And when I talk about gender, I also talk about the LGBTIQ community. So we looked at all those. Everyone has to be respected and brought in and not feel that they were just being discriminated against because of their status, whatever their status was. So that was a big issue to look through every legislation and do that. But it's a mechanical issue which happens in Parliament. The other issue was a bigger issue, and that was the constituency, because each one of us in Parliament was given an area where we operated from. So it's not necessarily an area where they elected us into Parliament, but after going into Parliament, we were given an area where we would work and we would communicate with that community and so on. So my constituency office was based in an area called Phoenix. It was close to the Phoenix settlement, but not incorporating the Phoenix settlement. It was outside because Phoenix settlement is in Inanda. It was a township close to that. And I then had to look at how do I work in this community? What do I do? So I visited every school, I visited every facility in that area. I spoke to every sports organization in that area, any CBOs, organizations, NGOs, and so on, and began to understand what is the feeling. And the first thing that I realized there was that there was a lot of gender based violence in the area, and there wasn't a particular organization that was dealing with gender based violence. So we established a 24-hour helpline, which was called the Domestic Violence Helpline. We got, volunteers from the community. We trained them in counseling skills, and then we got this telephone line, which I was sponsoring, and we, in the afternoons after the certain number of hours that the people, volunteers, would sit in the office, they would then link the line to somebody who would take the evening shifts. And I also took the evening shifts sometimes and weekend, so that they come in the morning and they, disconnect the line so that they can answer the telephone in the office. But when they go home, they connect that line to somebody else's telephone, and we each had a turn. And so we provided a 24-hour service to the people. And in doing this, we had like the cooperation of the police, the local, shelters, people who could react immediately if there was an emergency, but also people who could just give some advice and counseling and help the person to, to vent their feelings. Because often you find that the victims of violence want to talk about it to somebody, and they feel that they don't have anyone to talk about, because very often people feel ashamed. If they are assaulted, they feel ashamed of being assaulted. And so they don't want to talk to anyone about it. And then, they don't want the community to know that this is what's happening in my house. And so it has to be something private. On a telephone, you're not able to see, we're not able to see the person is not able to see us. And so they feel at leisure to be able to speak to us and tell us exactly what is happening without feeling, any sort of fear or anxiety about it. And that helped them. So many people just phoned and spoke, and then they didn't want any further. It also helped empower them, because the way we counseled, we would empower them with information that, look, if something happens, this is where you can get help. This is what your rights are. This is what you are able to do yourself. And so by giving them that information, it empowers them. And so they would feel, that the helpline really assisted them. So this is one of the things that we did in that area. But apart from that, we also kind of assisted in ensuring, that the community has, facilities are provided in the community. Of course, through National Parliament, we weren't able to do much in terms of service provision, because that is the responsibility of local government. But we could apply pressure. And I can tell you of one instance where there was a person whose young son, was met with an accident and was disabled. And he couldn't work. His parents were pensioners. He was older. He was about just 20 years old or somewhere around there. And so he couldn't get a pension himself. But there is the possibility of getting a disability grant. And he went to the doctor, and he went to the welfare organization to apply for a disability grant. and they refused to give him the grant. The mother came crying to us to say, "Look, we don't know what to do. He's 20, he was independent, now he is dependent on us. We are pensioners, we can't support him. And, we are finding it very difficult to see our son suffering. So, what can we do?" And, although it was like temporary, he would get better, but he would get better. It would take about a year or so before he would actually be able to go and work again. And so he was in the situation, and we felt that he should get a disability grant because we looked at the act, and the act clearly said that you can have a disability grant on a temporary basis for that period. You know, you don't have to be permanently disabled to get this. But the official in the offices didn't want to give that grant. So what we did is we mobilized the community, my office and myself. We mobilized the community and we said, let's go and demonstrate. It's our government, but we demonstrated. We went there with a whole big crowd of people and we said we want to see the person who, is in charge of this, who has refused to give this grant, accept this application. And then we went to that person and he said that he can't help it, it's not him who makes the decision. He was making excuses. And so I went there and I said, look, I'm an MP and I want to speak to your head. Put me through from your office to your superior right now. And this crowd is going to sit in your office until you do that. And then they were forced to put me through to their superior. I spoke to them, I told them the situation, I read out the act, I had the act with me. I read it out and I told them, this is the right of this person. Why are you refusing him this right? Give me a reason, and if your reason is right, we will go away. But if you don't have a reason, then give him the grant. And the man had to then give him the grant, and that's how he got it. So sometimes we have to use, get the community mobilized. And the community was happy because now they learned, a trick how they can get, if they have the correct information, if you have the rights, then you can access that right. So, yeah, those were some of the things that we did. And it's important because that is what Bapuji said, that, in a peaceful way, we can get the, get communities and empower communities.
Yes, Ilaji, thank you so much. In fact, what you just now mentioned, that is such an important thing for today's world, that in a peaceful way, we can still make changes in society and in the world. We have been so honored to have you here with us. You have thrown light on so many things which probably, we are not able to understand perfectly through the books. But coming from you, I think we have been pretty lucky, I must say, as the teachers and the students of ISAMS. This is a media academy situated in Noida in the NCR, just near Delhi. We are really, really honored. I would now hand over my this to my colleague Bharti, who is going to conclude the program.
Ilaji, on behalf of all our students, Tanuja ji, our director, and faculty members, I would like to express my very sincere gratitude to you for sharing your thoughts with our students and sparing your these very precious moments with us. Bapuji's teachings continue to inspire us and guide not only in India, guide everyone not only in India but around the world. So we hope to take inspiration from what we have learned today, especially about journalism, that we should give educational value, authentic information, positive action through our writings and through our acts. So thank you so much. Thank you once again for joining us today and inspiring all of us.
Thank you.
With this, I would like to conclude today's webinar. Mrs. Ela Gandhi coming all the way virtually to interact with the students on this important and significant day, that it's not just to remember Mahatma Gandhi ji on his death anniversary, but also to remember that 75 years have passed since our independence, and it is high time that we recall all the values and principles given by Bapu and walk on that path. With this, I will conclude the webinar, and thank you so much, Ilaji, from all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
वैष्णव जन तो दीन कहिए जे, भीड़ पराए जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो दीन कहिए जे, भीड़ पराए जाने रे। पर दुखे उपकार करे पर दुखे उपकार करे तो मन अभिमान